Rabbi,
Yes.
what that mean? Matzinu.
One more time.
They call it matzinu.
What's the context? Where are you?
It's like you know the Kalba Homer.
Right.
It's one of they talk about that this is one of the 13 form they have to interpret to get interpretation on the pasuk.
Hold on. I've got my list here. I'm just having a little trouble understanding the phrasing, but if I look at the list, I'm sure I'll figure out which one you're referring to. Hold on.
Okay. Because here it's a prayer. I know I got a prayer, and this do talk about that. I have to go here and see this thing.
I'm not finding anything that fits the phrasing that I'm hearing you using.
It's Maxino. Let me see where I put it. Matzino.
Matzino.
Yeah. Okay. Not that big.
I'm not coming across any
anything.
Nothing that matches the pronunciation that you're using.
Okay.
So if you can show me where you actually found it, then sometimes that'll make it easier for me to look it up.
Yeah, because I'm on the Talmud, on the Kedushin,
right?
But it's on the notes. On the notes, and now on the page, hey, that's 5A.
Yeah, it's 5. So 5B. So I'll tell you what. Take a nice close-up photo of the note, and I'll find it from there.
Okay.
And then I can send you a reply of what it's about.
Okay, because I'm known the Siddur is it's like a prayer or explanation.
Yeah, there's a list of the 13 principles for part of the morning service. Well, the preliminary service.
Exactly. So when I know it's 13 like a, but I don't know how they work. If they each one of the 13 form, they have to interpret the pasuk. They
right.
each have a name.
Is it what?
If each one have a particular name.
Well, they have a name or a phrase that they use to describe them. Yes.
Oh, okay. That's
one of the ones. Like one of the ones we've been using a lot in the last few Mishnayot is Gezerah Shava, right? And that's
okay.
One of the ones of the list. Kal V'chomer, like you mentioned, is also one of the list. Those are the two most famous.
Okay.
But then there's many that are combinations of klal uprat, of a general versus specific. But I don't know one that sounds like what you're describing. But send me the picture, and I'll look for it and see what I can find.
Yeah, because it's on the notes,
Okay, but we've got our Mishnah to dive into, and we've got a juicy run through the rest of chapter 8. I'm going to go ahead and warn you now. We're going to finish chapter 8. I think we can make it, but we're not going to go into chapter 9 because there's a totally different topic in chapter 9. So we're doing chapter 8. We'll see how far we get. I think we can finish it tonight because it's all sort of one long topic. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of discussion, a lot of modern questions as well. So let's go ahead and get started. Oh, one more person coming in. All right. So you may remember that we began back in the earlier Mishnayot with talking about which things could be done in Hebrew, which things could be done in any language. And now we are continuing to go through different sections that have to be done in Hebrew in this part, and asking ourselves, well, what else do we know about them? So in addition to saying these ones are done in this language or that language, we're also learning a little bit of some of the law about that topic. Mishnah, chapter 8 of Sotah, Mishnah 2, is going to give us the beginning of the extended discussion of the anointed address, that is to say, the address of the anointed priest that is given to the soldiers, and in particular, beginning with Mishnah 2, of the soldiers who are going home, the ones who will not go on to fight in the war. Now, a lot of that is going to have to be explained. So let's go ahead and get the Mishnah on the table, and then I will discuss it, and we can have questions and commentary. Taken from Deuteronomy 20. Then the officers shall address the people, saying, is there anyone who has built a new house but has not dedicated it? Let him go back to his home. Explanation. It is the same whether he built a house for straw, a house for cattle, a house for wood, or a storehouse. Meaning, regardless of the type of house that he built, if it was a house, meaning if it was fit for residency, then it is covered by this declaration. It is the same whether he built, purchased, inherited, or somebody gave it to him as a present. Meaning, if he has a home and it is new to him, that qualifies for this rule. And we're just going to go through the next section as well, because all three of these sections have similar ideas that we can discuss. Is there anyone who has planted a vineyard but has never harvested it, right, or not redeemed it? Again, an explanation. It is the same whether he planted a vineyard or planted 5 fruit trees, or even 5 different species. It is the same whether he planted, bent, or grafted it, or whether he purchased, inherited, or somebody gave it to him as a present. Just as a little FYI for the non-farmers, planted, you're probably familiar with, bent or grafted. Bending is where you would, especially with vines, bend them back into the ground, and it would go in and it would take root in that new location, and then a new offshoot would come from that new root cluster. So
what do you mean redeem, Rabbi?
So what I mean redeem is they're talking here about the issue of orla, right? You have a plant that you have been growing, and in the 4th year, you have to redeem the first fruit and bring it to the temple. So that's what at least the Gemara, the Halakha, thinks is being discussed in this case. It's specifically in that time. And for marriage, is there anyone who has betrothed a woman, quote, but has not yet married her, right? So this is a reminder, again, we've talked about this in other classes, but it really is important to remember that a betrothal, a super engagement in the Jewish sense, would take place before the final marriage ceremony was performed. And that would mean that a person was married-ish, but not completely until the end. Nowadays, we do both sections, the giving of a ring, as well as the Shavar Brachot, in roughly the same ceremony, with maybe a pause in the middle for a few words from the rabbi and the reading of the ketubah. In the ancient world, there'd be the pause of months or maybe even a year. So we're talking about the betrothal part. He's given the ring, he's made the declaration, she has agreed, they are betrothed, but they haven't finalized the ceremony with the Shavar Brachot. If you betrothed but not married completely, it is the same whether he betrothed a virgin or a widow or even a shomeret yavam. If this is a woman that was married to your brother, he died leaving no heirs, and now you are taking her as a way to fulfill his lineage, his inheritance. Or even if a man heard that his brother had died in battle, he returns home. All of these hear the priest's words concerning the battles of war and return home, and they supply water and food and repair the roads. Okay, many different topics that are put into this, but I wanted you to see the pattern that the rabbis were following for all three. And then, of course, we have that final line about what they do instead of fighting. So let's go back up. Housing, what can we derive? If it is a residence that, or if it is a building fit for residence, a person could live there, then that's fine. You didn't have to build it. As long as it's new to you, that's fine. You can see here the development of the pattern is, it's not only the ideal archetypical case, it is the other cases that are similar that are also covered by this halakha, by this rule. And that's why when it comes to the planting, or rather planting but not harvesting, even if it's not a whole vineyard, even if it is a different type of fruit trees, that is still covered. Even if you're planting it in different ways, it's still covered. And so too for marriage. It's not only the perfect version of a marriage of, one man, one woman, their virgins, their first wedding. It can also be after a widow or a divorce, or even for yibum, for the Levirate marriage. These all would count as well. Yes, Natan.
So the bottom line, it's all about enjoying for something new.
So based off the concept in the Torah and the commentaries, there's a real concern that there would be a unique tragedy if a person had put in the effort or put in the connection or had a potential that was right there waiting for them, and then they died before they could truly enjoy it. That would be an additional layer of tragedy during wartime that should be avoided, that they should be allowed to experience that before they are put in harm's way through a war. Now we're going to come back to what we mean by war later on in this section, in this chapter. But for the moment, we're just going to use the generic word war. Aaron.
Not to jump the gun, but they're talking about discretionary wars, right? Not obligatory wars?
We are going to wait to define the word war. So indeed, those terms are going to become very important later on. But for the moment, we're just going to use the generic term war. Because otherwise, like you said, it's a little jumping the gun, a war terminology. And it's important to get the basic concept down before we see how it applies in different settings. Okay, so that does bring us up to our final line of the Mishnah, however, that they hear the priest's words and then they go home. But when they go home, they don't go home. They retreat from the front lines and they provide service to the military, right? They become the logistical support. They are supplying food, they are supplying water, they are running the wagons back and forth, they are repairing the roads to make sure the troops can move from one place to another during battle efficiently. Right? Nowadays, this is built into the military structure, at least in most places where there's a professional army, where there will be special crews that have the job of moving different types of supplies. In older systems, this was done by the general population, but certain people had more of an obligation to participate. Natan, yes?
So it's work in Tasuka in how is it Tasuka in English? When you are in the army,
Right.
you are the front, okay, the combat, and
Right.
you have in the retreat,
The rear.
the rear, work
Right.
in the rear, correct? The bottom line, everything what is communication, what is submission, all this maintenance, all this kind of stuff.
It's called either logistics or support.
Tasuka in Hebrew in the military. Okay.
Got it.
Okay.
And
So you say it's what? Logistic or what?
logistics
Logistic.
or support. You know,
Okay.
they're not frontline troops, they are support troops.
Okay.
And both are perfectly fine, and both are essential to the running of a proper military. I forget the quote, but at least from World War II, I remember it was something like for every soldier that was on the front line, there were 10 people making sure they could be there. That you needed to have a very big logistical support to make sure you could actually get combat troops out into the field. And I know that in the US during World War II, which is I know a little better than many other wars, there were the merchant marines and the Seabees and other people that often were not necessarily, some were actual troops, some were not troops, but were technically civilians, but filled very important roles in the combat theater. And that has been important for a very long time. And going back into here, we see that the people who are let off the hook still have a very important job to do. Aaron, yes?
Yeah, back to what Natan was saying, the word Sukhan referring to the front troops. Sukhan means dangerous or no?
Oh, sakana means dangerous, but I don't think that was the word that he was using.
Oh.
Rabbi, let me ask, in case that brother, the one have to get married, he's married already. He have to marry with his brother wife anyway.
Yes, yeah, for a levirate marriage in the ancient world, yes, not nowadays, but in the ancient world, he would still be expected to marry his brother's wife and to give her a child that would then be able to inherit for his brother.
Okay.
And Rabbi,
Yes.
is the reason he gets to return home for the levirate marriage or stay home for the levirate marriage, that's not the added tragedy. That's so he can fill the mitzvah and not have his brother's line die out, right? Or is that a different reason than the other one?
Well, or more specifically, it is the emphasis in this Mishnah is not about why, but who, meaning that it is still a marriage, right? He is still engaged from that point. And it may not be the usual type of engagement. It may not even be a especially voluntary engagement, since the obligation devolves upon him when his brother dies, but that's still engaged. So it still falls under this category.
So that's an obligatory marriage versus one you want to do of your own free will.
Yes, although we should remember there were people who got married that, yes, it was of their own free will, but that doesn't mean they were excited about it. The ancient world marriage was sometimes for romance. We talked about that, especially during my sermon recently about Isaac, who, although it was an arranged marriage, very much loved his wife. And sometimes it was just, you married who you married, like Jacob and Leah. He got married to her and he just did his duty, but it doesn't seem like there was any deep and abiding love and affection between the two of them. Yeah.
What happens if he has an ibum? So he has the first child with the ex-wife of the brother,
right?
And that kid will
inherit
all the money from his brother. But what happens if he's the first son? Can he also inherit the money from him, from the biological father?
So I think at some point we're probably going to want to go ahead and study Masechet Yibum, because this is such a foreign topic, and there's a lot of complicated ins and outs on it. So maybe we should put that on the list of other Masechtot, other sections of Mishnah for us to investigate.
Okay.
So that because that's otherwise we'll be here all night just answering questions about Yibum.
So the short answer, do you remember?
The short answer that I remember is that the first child counts as his brother's child,
so
not as his.
Doesn't receive anything from him.
Because it's technically not his, but that bli neder, I can't swear to that because it's been a while since I've studied Yibum because it doesn't come up all that often.
Yeah.
But that is what I remember off the top of my head. Okay. So one of the things that makes this a very interesting topic, not only for our ancestors, is because this has become a question in the modern world, in particular in Israel, where there is a mandatory draft when people leave high school. There are some that ask, how does this apply? And also the question of whether or not those who don't serve in combat roles at least are obligated to serve in other roles. This becomes especially controversial, as an understatement, in the relationship between the ultra-Orthodox in Israel, the Haredim as they're usually called, and the non-ultra-Orthodox or non-Haredi. There are many Orthodox that serve in the military, but many of them are not what are classified as ultra-Orthodox or Haredi. So whether or not they should have other jobs, since oftentimes they are excused from service, but don't perform logistical service either. So this section of halakha and the way that it's discussed throughout the commentaries is still has very much a lively debate in Israeli politics right now in this day.
And it's very interesting if you are a new immigrant in Israel, okay, and you are married, they don't force you to do the army. You have exception for the army. And if you are the only son and your siblings died in combat, and you are the only son, also you can receive, like, you don't need to be in the army, or at least not in the front of the combat. And if you are a new immigrant and like a woman, and you become to be more observant in Judaism, also you have exception from the army. So you see all what we are learning now in application in real life today.
And that's something that is very, unique in Jewish history, because for 2,000 years, more or less, these particular points couldn't be implemented. We didn't have an army that was a Jewish army from most of the last 2,000 years. So it is very interesting to see how Israel is trying to apply or not apply to everyone's satisfaction these parts of halakha. But we're not done with it yet, right? Because we have the people who don't go back that you might have thought fulfilled those categories. So now we're in Mishnah 3. The following do not return home. He who built a gatehouse, a portico, or a porch, right? If you put a deck on your house, if you put a little booth out in front of the building, that does not count as a house. So that does not get you off the hook. He who planted 4 fruit trees or 5 trees which are not fruit bearing, right? So this is not sufficient to be comparable to a vineyard. He who took back his divorced wife, because it said specifically a new wife. If you've been married to her before and now you're remarrying her, then that doesn't count. Also, if a high priest married a widow or an ordinary priest married a divorcee or halutza is the woman who had been promised in Levirate marriage but then was not married by her brother-in-law, or an Israelite married a mamzeret or a netinah. Remember, mamzeret is the product of a forbidden union. The netinah were the descendants of the Canaanites who had basically tricked Joshua into allowing them to stay. Or the daughter of an Israelite married a mamzer, the masculine form, or a natin, masculine form. He does not return home. Okay, so all of those other categories of the marriage are marriages that are not supposed to happen. The high priest is not supposed to marry a widow. A regular priest is not supposed to marry a divorcee, and so on for the other categories. So even though they got married or are betrothed, since their betrothal is technically forbidden, therefore they are not excused from the military service. Everyone following the logic?
Yep.
Okay. Rabbi Yehuda says, even he who builds a house upon its original foundations does not return home, meaning if your house fell down and you're just rebuilding it, that's not enough. It has to be a new house. Rabbi Eliezer says, even he who builds a brick house in Sharon does not return home. Apparently, says the commentary, the area of Sharon that he's referring to, the houses that were made of rocks were constantly in need of rebuilding. So you would rebuild it as much as twice a year. So you were almost in a state of constant building, and therefore it was not valid as a reason not to be in the draft. Okay? Okay. Mishnah 4. The following do not move from their place.
Rabbi, before continue, okay, I have a question regarding the previous one.
Yes.
So what happens if you do an extensive extensions in your house, like really major extensions?
If you are just adding to your house, most say that is not enough. If you are building a new house, your guest house in the back, then that would be potentially enough for you to not be drafted.
So if you add rooms to your house,
That was normal. That happened all the time in the ancient world. Remember, no building codes, which is also why lots of people died when there was an earthquake. So yeah, people would add a new room or a new level when they had children or their children got married.
so
That's
it doesn't consider a new house.
No.
Okay.
Nice try, Mr. Real Estate. Okay, Mishnah 4. The following do not move from their place. All right, so move from their place, I have to explain. It's an idiom that's being used here based off Deuteronomy 24, which is talking about people who don't even show up for the draft. The people we talked about in Mishnah 2 and 3, they go for the draft, and then when the announcement is made, they go back. The people in Mishnah 4 don't even go to answer the summons. Right? They don't leave their place. They don't move to the recruitment office and then go home. They stay home from the beginning. Okay, so who are they? He who built a new house and dedicated it. So you've built your house and you've dedicated it. You can stay in your house, right? You do not have to go. These are all considered to be like a year period of enjoying the thing you've built. He who planted a vineyard and used its fruit, he who married his betrothed, or brought in his yivamah, right, the Levirate marriage. As it is said, he shall be exempt 1 year for the sake of his household, to give happiness to the woman he married. And then they midrashically break down that phrase, his household. This refers to his house. Shall be, this refers to the vineyard, the planting. To give happiness to the wife, this refers very literally to his wife, the newlywed. And he married, this includes even the Yavamah, right, the widow of his brother. These do not supply water and food and repair the roads for the army. So they are totally 100% off the hook. Okay.
So that's the one. So he got to be on his house for 1 year, right?
Yes, he gets 1 year with his wife. He gets 1 year with his new house. It's like a 1 year get out of army free card.
So he don't have to be worried about community war, nothing like that.
Right. He's not even doing community service. He's not doing logistical support. He is just home.
So how he can support his soul?
Well, no, he still works. I mean, he can work in the farm. He can work if he's if he's a potter, he can make pottery. He can do his job, but he doesn't do the army.
But he don't have to go to the army for anything connection to the army. He's free.
Yes, exactly, right. He doesn't go to serve in the front lines, and he doesn't serve in logistical support or anything like that either. He's just living his life like a normal person, not connected to the army.
And try to make a children. That's the first.
If he's married, remember, you don't have to do all 4 of these at the same time, right? So maybe he built his house and he's dedicated it, but he's not married yet. So, but yes, if he's married, of course, having children is very, very important.
Okay.
Yeah, sometimes it's important to do these one step at a time.
So what happens if almost at the end of the year, his wife is pregnant with the first child? Can he still be at home?
He still stays home because it's not about getting pregnant. That's a blessing, of course. But literally it says, right, that he is doing this to give joy to his wife. Right? So it's not just about giving her a baby. It's about giving her the company of being together for at least a year.
So doesn't mean also that doesn't happen. There's not a difference if he has a son or a daughter or a child during that year and he wants to stay 1 year for at least for the first year of the baby. Too bad.
Too bad. Unfortunately, too bad. But even if he has children from a previous wife, maybe he's a widower and he gets married to a new wife, he still stays a year with her. So the children are a bonus and they're a blessing, and we know that Judaism loves kids, but this is not about the babies.
Yeah, but he get his can be the case that he's not married yet.
Yes, like he could have just built
Yeah,
the
because-
house. Maybe he's not
Yeah,
married. He
because-
could have planted the vineyard, but not be
Yeah,
married.
because also I'm reading the passage and say when the man get a new woman.
Right, and that's why we have the second half of the Mishnah is showing how the Midrash works, how they break out the different pieces from that long verse.
Exactly. Can be like he's do just the kedushin, like he just do the kiddushin, right?
Right, but mean you're talking about the betrothal or the actual finalization of the marriage?
No, he's giving like the ring,
Right,
but he's not married yet.
Right, that's heresy, right.
So that means from that case, from it's when he give it to the like a peruta, the small.
Right, when he gives her a token, he gives her a ring or something. Yes.
That means from there he's not available to go to the army.
No. So if he has given her the ring, but not married her, then he still goes to the army, and then they send him back to help with the logistics. If he's given her the ring and married her, then he doesn't show up at all for the army.
Okay, that's the difference. Okay,
that's the difference between
I
3
see
and
now.
4.
Okay, so when he's giving the ring,
4.
he go to the army, but they put it on the back line. He's not on the front line.
Exactly, that's right.
He do service, but not the world service.
Exactly.
So when he get married, that prepare him. When he's get married, he go to the back to home, free from any connection for the army.
From any military obligation. That's right.
I got it. Okay.
Aaron, you have your hand up?
By first fruits, not first fruits. When it says he used its fruits, are they referring to the 5th year?
Well, no, this would be that he actually brought the bikurim, he brought the sacrifice, the offering to the temple, which is in the 4th year.
All right. But it said used it, but they mean used it to give to the priest?
Right, he was able to enjoy it. I mean, he enjoyed it, through the act of the bikurim offering.
Oh.
Yeah, now I understand the pasuk, Rabbi. Exactly what you said. I got it. Yeah, I got it.
All right, now let's talk about things which are not as noble. There's a feeling of newlyweds, new house, and all of that. We understand why these people are being let from the front lines. But what about cowards? Right. So this is Mishnah 5. Then the officer shall go on addressing the troops and say, "Is there anyone afraid and disheartened?" Right. That they're afraid or disheartened. What does that mean from Deuteronomy 20? Rabbi Akiva says, afraid and disheartened is to be understood literally, right? That they cannot stand in the battle lines and see a drawn sword. Right? This is what we would call, a wimp, a coward, right? That they are weak. They are not able to go out. Now, nowadays, there is a huge stigma against that. And in most cultures, for most of history, there's a huge stigma against that. But what Rabbi Akiva is saying is that, indeed, the Torah is saying such a person should go back. And we'll talk about what they do, but they go back. That if they are unable to bravely stand in the lines of soldiers, remember, this is people standing in large ranks of massed troops, that they should go home. Again, home we're going to see is a question mark. Rabbi Yossi HaGalil, right, Yossi the Galilean says, afraid and disheartened, this is one who is afraid because of the transgressions he has committed. So it's not that he is afraid of the battle itself. It's not that he thinks, oh no, I'm going to get killed, or oh no, I won't be able to fight. It's somebody who thinks, I know that I have committed sins, and if I go out to fight, this is when God is going to let the sins catch up to me. I will be punished by being allowed to be murdered on the field of battle. So they are afraid because they think of themselves as not deserving of protection in battle, and that they think the opposite, that they are deserving of dying in battle, and therefore they are concerned to go out. This is the therefore, he argues, let me scroll that down, the Torah connected all of these, meaning all the categories of those who return home, with him, that he may return home on their account. All right, so I just want to make sure you understand what's that last line that he's trying to draw our attention to here is telling us. He's saying there are some people who built a house. There are some people who have gotten engaged. There are some people who are cowards. There are some people who are sinners and who are afraid of the sins catching up with them. When the priest finishes talking, they all leave. And that means nobody knows which category the other people are in. Right? The shame that a person might feel for being either a sinner or a coward is hidden, because the other people who are leaving also are leaving for non-shameful reasons. Right? So people watch you walk home or walk off from the battlefield and then go help. And they say, oh, well, maybe he built a house. Maybe he planted some fruit trees. Maybe he got engaged. Right? They don't immediately think, he's probably a sinner or he's probably a coward. This gives them a reasonable cover to be able to leave rather than stay, and because they are too ashamed to walk away during this time. Natan, I think you have your hand up.
Yeah, so the one that are afraid because of the transgression, they thought that they will try to kill themselves in battle?
No, they considered it as that you would be more vulnerable on the field of battle. That although God certainly gives everybody as much time as possible to repent and fix their transgression, that if you put yourself in a dangerous situation, that you are almost begging for your punishment to come soon. And therefore, going off to battle, it's almost like, daring God to kill you for your transgressions. It's just not a good idea.
That's on the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Hagili, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, but everyone makes some transgression. Tell me one person that is completely clean.
Okay, so that's partly what the second section is coming to tell us.
Mm.
Right? Rabbi Yossi says a high priest who married a widow, an ordinary priest who married a divorcee or chalutza, an Israelite who married a mamzeret or natina, and the daughter of an Israelite who married a mamzer or natin. Behold, this one is afraid and disheartened. So he's trying to narrow the category of particular sins, in this case, who you marry, that you might be expecting. Why? Because all of these carry a punishment of karet. And karet literally means to be cut off. And it can also be taken as meaning that you no longer have any protection, from the spiritual protection of God. So he is trying to limit that. And indeed, other commentators also argue about what it might be that you're afraid of. However, there are other commentators who say, no, if you have committed any transgression that you have not done tshuva about, that you have not done proper repentance for, then that's what is the issue here. It's not a question of these are the only people who commit sins. These are people who have sins that are hanging over them, that feel the weight of their sin on them. And others may have sinned, but they've taken care of it. They've dealt with it. They've done tshuva. They have restored their balance. These people have not. So the commentaries are divided on exactly who would be in this category. Okay.
Now, so if you feel that you are one of them, you walk away.
You walk away.
So if you don't want to die, you walk away and say, okay, thank you, God bless America, bye. Like,
So,
that's easy.
So the question becomes like, who's left, right?
But I see the comment. The Torah put the people like the one because they build a new house and have a new wife. They try the Torah make it like excuse that way that when those people leave, everybody think they have like a new house or new wife.
Exactly.
And don't feel that bad.
You might think, that we would want to boo and hiss at the sinners, but that's not what Judaism does. I mean, we don't celebrate them, we don't hold them up as heroes, but we also do not want to humiliate people who are, like Nathan said, being human, who have done something that they shouldn't have, but we all have. And just because the battle caught them at a time when they have not yet done tshuva, doesn't mean that they should be shamed for that. They should be given a chance to do tshuva and be able to return to a proper connection with God. But there still would be a lot of people there. But in case you haven't ever noticed, war is bad, right? War is no fun. And that's where Mishnah 6 comes in. Right? It shall be when the officers have finished speaking to the people, they shall appoint captains of hosts at the head of the people. Again, carrying on from Deuteronomy 20. And at the rear of the people, they station guards in front of them and others behind them with iron axes in their hands. And should anyone wish to flee, they have permission to strike his thighs, because the beginning of falling, meaning of the battle collapsing, is fleeing. As it said, and Israel fled before the Philistines, and the people also suffered a great slaughter. And elsewhere it states, and the men of Israel fled before the Philistines and fell down slain. So in biblical times, and really for a very long time, for most of our history, of human history, when you had a war, you didn't win by killing all the other people, like because your guys were better with the spear. You won because their side began to run away. And once they start running away, you can either kill them as they run, or at the very least, they're now no longer a threat and your side wins. So they're very worried that if people are in the army and they start running, they're retreating from the enemy, that's going to make everybody retreat. And now we're all going to get killed. So once you're in the war, once you're in the army, man, you are going to go and stand and fight. And if you don't, well, every army has the rule, deserters will be punished. And in most armies, deserters are killed. Right? If you try to run away from a battle, your own officers will kill you for doing so. This is one of the reasons why, at least within the American Army, the drill sergeants and the training and boot camp is so harsh. It is trying to make you more afraid of the sergeant than you are of the enemy, right? Because when the sergeant tells you, charge the enemy, you need to do it, or else the whole army is going to fail and you'll all be killed.
So that's one of the many of the reasons why Gideon preferred to work, create a small group, but very strong committee that a lot of people.
Exactly. Having a huge army, but that's going to melt away with fear is not an advantage, because even somebody that was committed and was brave, when they see others moving and running, they're going to give up too. So sometimes it's better to have a smaller group that is not going to break and run, which is why, although we can read the earlier Mishnah about those that are disheartened or afraid as being compassionate to them, we can also read it as just being sound military strategy. You don't want somebody in your front ranks that is afraid to see a sword, because when they fail, when their fear cripples them on the battlefield, it's going to infect the other people as well. So letting them go was a blessing for them and a blessing for the other soldiers. And remember, of course, they still have a job to do. They can still carry water, they can still bring food, they can still repair roads. It's not like they're not helping. All right, Mishnah 7. Getting back to Aaron's question from the very beginning, to what does this apply, right? What are the circumstances, what are the matters that this applies to? To a voluntary war. But in a war commanded, meaning by the Torah, all go out. even a bridegroom from his chamber and a bride from her canopy. This is a line taken from the prophet Joel. So the idea here is that there are two different types of war. We're going to see a third category in a second, but it's basically an argument of semantics more than anything else. That there are milchemet reshut, there's a milchemet reshut, a voluntary war. Now, voluntary war doesn't mean everyone says, what do you want to do this week? I don't know, let's have a war. Right? A voluntary war means a war that the nation has decided to pursue, even though it was not commanded in the Torah to do it. In milchemet mitzvah, a war of mitzvah, a commanded war, these are wars like the wars of Joshua and the wars of against the Amalekites, or a war to defend Israel from an outside invader. That is a milchemet mitzvah. That is an obligatory war. So what they're trying to say here is that all of the, you can go home, or you don't even have to show up, or if you're afraid, it's not a problem. All of that is only when you have a war that is voluntary, like a war of expansion. The example they often will use is the wars of David. But if it's a war that God commanded, then you find a way to fight. You find a way to serve in the front lines if at all possible, because those are duties that are on everyone's shoulder, and God was not giving us an excuse not to engage. Nowadays, of course, and the only one that's left, the defense of Israel. The other categories, the Amalekites and the Canaanite wars, those no longer count because those wars were finished a few thousand years ago. But in defense of Israel, that is still a milchemet mitzvah. That is still an obligatory war. And so the exemptions that we saw in all the rest of chapter 8 do not apply for those types of wars. Let me just explain a little bit the alternative reading of Rabbi Yehuda, and then we can discuss this concept more. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda says, to what does this apply? To a war commanded by the Torah, but in an obligatory war, all go out, even a bridegroom from his chamber and a bride from his canopy. So he uses a different terminology here. He uses the term milchemet mitzvah and the words milchemet chova, right? That in a milchemet mitzvah, that in the obligatory war or a commanded war, everyone goes out, he agrees. Excuse me. But that there were also wars called a milchemet chova. And the milchemet chova he compares to the commanded war, but in milchemet mitzvah he compares to a war that is necessary but not commanded. So the phrase that's used in the discussion is, for example, a preemptive war. In the modern times, think the 6-day war. That the war has not begun, but although, of course, there was still a state of war, but imagine there hadn't been. The war, in the fighting part of the war, the hot part of the war, the major part of the war, 6-day war is really not a great example of preemptive strike for a lot of reasons, but most people consider it, so pardon my use of it. It is a war that you can still see coming, right? You've seen the troops advance. You know that peace has been rejected. You know the war is about to begin. That he considered to be a milchemet mitzvah. That is an obligatory war, a commanded war, whereas a war of obligation, that would be the wars of Joshua and the wars of the Amalekites, or the war of defense.
But for him, the way to behave in a commanded war, when a duty war, is exactly the same. Everyone go to the army.
Well, no. He would say that the exemptions apply if you are fighting a preemptive battle, that you still give the exemptions.
Also, if it's a mitzvah war.
Right. Well, that's like I said, it's really more of an argument over semantics. In the Talmud, when this gets discussed, they go into much more. That basically Rabbi Yehuda agrees with the Tana Kama, with the initial opinion. They're arguing about very marginal cases of like preemptive war and things like that. So that I don't want to dwell too much on it because it's a distinction without a major difference. The primary idea is mostly agreed upon. If you're fighting to defend the country, if you were fighting in the days of Joshua, if you were fighting against the Amalekites, those are wars that everyone has to be involved in. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 8. Like I mentioned, we're not going to start chapter 9 tonight because that deals with the finding of a dead body and the breaking of a cow's neck. It's a whole nother complicated topic, and I don't want to begin it. I'd like to do it as a unit. But do people have any other questions or comments either on Mishnah 7 or the rest of chapter 8 that we covered tonight?
Okay, Rabbi, we on the Mishnah Sotah.
Yes.
Why the Mishnah bring all those kind of the question when we on the Sotah and we talk about just Sotah, right?
Okay, so the logic of the Mishnah's organization, a wonderful conversation that academics and rabbis have been scratching their head with for a while, right? Because if I was going to organize the Mishnah, you're right. If I'm talking about Sotah, about the accused adulteress, I don't immediately see why I need to bring in the discussion of who goes to fight and who doesn't. That doesn't exactly lend itself. However, what is the explanation in general for why we get these digressions here or in other places and other Mishnahs that are similar is because the Mishnah wasn't organized purely by theme and topic. It was mostly organized by theme and topic, but occasionally the rabbis had additional material they wanted to include, and they found places where it would be easy to remember to also talk about that. So since this section of the Mishnah began talking about whether or not which pieces of the Torah had to be written on the scroll and had to be said to the woman who was suspected, the Sotah woman, because that was about the language and Hebrew and non-Hebrew and all of that, let's also talk about other things that can be in Hebrew or not in Hebrew. So as long as we're talking about this topic, we're going to talk about these other topics too, because it's convenient. Now, to the modern mind, it doesn't seem very obvious that this would be a natural thing to include. But that's because we have a very Dewey Decimal Library kind of prejudice. We think of things as being easy to organize based on how clearly they line up in a book. The rabbis, when they were putting the Mishnah together, they were focused on how easy will it be for me to orally teach someone and then to remember it so they can teach the next generation. And they felt that this worked well for them.
Rabbi, were these written one at a time, or were they just written all at once and then kind of chaptered out?
So yes, you can. I highly, encourage people to look at my last Pathway to Judaism class on the transmission of the oral Torah and the path of the Masorah, the tradition as it was handed down. The Mishnah itself was not given at Sinai, meaning God did not literally begin with brachot and start reciting the Mishnah. God taught the Mishnah to Moses, meaning he taught Moses the oral Torah, and he would have taught it in whichever configuration fit his student. And so he wouldn't have begun necessarily with brachot, chapter 1, Mishnah 1. He would have shared whatever was necessary for Moses to understand what Moses needed at different points. And then Moses did the same for Joshua. Always the same content, but given as needed by each student. The Mishnah that we have is the lesson plan, the teacher notes, primarily taken from Rabbi Meir, according to our traditional understanding. And they were basically collated, added together, not because he taught them in this strict order, but just because his formulations, generally speaking, were the clearest and easiest to remember and the shortest, which also made them easier to remember. So there isn't an order of which Mishnah was edited when. It was just when these topics were discussed, this is what was said. And then Rabbi Yehuda gathered them all together and put them into a broader organizational structure that became what we now call the Mishnah.
Right. No, what I was asking though, were these written one at a time and then compiled and put into groups, or did they, or were these like all written down and then they kind of broke them up into chapters?
So they were all published orally by Rabbi Meir. Like, this is what he would say when asked about these topics. Again, most of these are from Rabbi Meir. If it's anonymous, it's considered to be Rabbi Meir's opinion. So when he taught about the war, he would say these words, but he did not necessarily teach them when also teaching about Sotah, right? Think of them like each one was a quote, a proverb that was in circulation for, I know how to remember something about who goes to war. And what happened was Rabbi Yehuda would take them, and he was the one that organized them all together. So they all pre-existed the Mishnah before Rabbi Yehuda put them down, but they weren't in any order. They were used as needed to teach individual students and groups of students according to the style of each teacher. And this version that we have is Rabbi Meir. Of course, when you look in the Talmud, you'll see other versions. Some of them we also have a record of called the Tosefta. But there are others in the Talmud called Braitot that are other versions of these same types of teachings. And they're often very useful for helping us to understand the Mishnah itself. So don't think of it as a traditional publication process. Think of this as being what different teachers said, and then all of their lesson plans were collated by one very hardworking student, Rabbi Yehuda.
But Rabbi, everything that they bring on those Mishnah, everything have any kind of connection to the Sotah, right? On the im.
I mean, it's not a connection in the traditional sense. You know, when we talk about who goes to war and who doesn't, yes, we can find a thematic connection. But that doesn't mean that's why it's here. It's probably in this section of the Mishnah, literally because it made it easier to remember them.
Okay.
Rabbi, the link that you sent about the Nebraska publisher.
Yes.
How serious are they? Like, let me re-ask the question. Okay. The Nebraska publisher, are books the kind of current publisher, or they are more like academical?
Right. So they are. So Nebraska publisher bought the publishing rights for JPS, Jewish Publication Society. So think of what the JPS is, what they published. That's the seriousness of their books. So some of the books are very academic. Some of them are more, for a popular audience. You don't find many that are traditional in the sense of, being closer to classical rabbinic teachings. The one example is the one I shared, which is the Commentator's Bible, which is a great version if you don't speak Hebrew. If you can't read a traditional Mikraot Gedolot, the traditional book that has all the commentaries, well, many of the commentaries in it, that's a great set to get, and 40% off. That's a really big saving because they're not cheap books, because they're giant books. They're really very tall. But if you're looking for traditional classical studies, then yeah, you'd probably want to check a different publisher. If you're looking for academic university level studies, then yes, there are many books that they have that are very good.
Yeah, I know. I have an issue now that we are having the classes Tuesday and Wednesday. I have a problem connecting with them. Like, maybe it's me just looking for something different, but I don't know. It's just the second question. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It's probably if I was asking me 10 years or 15 or 20 years ago, I would say, wow, yeah, that's amazing. people change. Okay, and for every time you have different needs,
Exactly.
you're looking for something different because you are different.
Right. There's no better and worse. It's what do you need at this moment in your learning.
Yes. I have an issue. I don't know what to do with it. Me correct a lot because I have the version in Hebrew.
Right.
It's very good. It's excellent. Now the problem is some of the explanation are in Aramaic, not and others they use a very archaic Hebrew that also is very difficult to understand.
Yes.
Okay.
Or technical language that isn't, or very short abbreviations that they expect you to know what you're talking about. Yes.
Exactly. So it's not the modern Hebrew that is easy to read.
Yes,
So
I absolutely agree.
So I have the 5 volumes and break my heart to buy all the version in English. But that's why I don't know what to do because for one can say, oh, I have, but sometimes when I want to use it, for example, for El Bar Torah in the Latino Shabbat, and then I'm using the same ones that are in a more clean Hebrew,
right?
Like the Rambam, or the Italians guy, the Spanish guy, that they have more clean. I don't know what to do, Rabbi. What do you recommend?
So what I would recommend, obviously because your Hebrew is perfectly fine, it's just the archaicness of it, is I don't know whether it would have all of the commentaries that you're looking for in the commentator's Bible. You can buy translations of Sforno. You can buy translations of Radak. That might help put it into cleaner English that modernizes some of them. Although Sforno and Radak are usually pretty clean.
Yeah, they're clean.
Yeah. The other thing that you can do is use Sefaria, right? Sefaria has a lot of translations, and it also has a lot of commentaries that link to other commentaries. And sometimes you can compare one to another, and you can go, "Oh, that's what he's talking about," because you can see another commentator with cleaner Hebrew talking about the same topic, and then you can unpack the more complicated guy more easily. That's something I use all the time. I'll come across somebody that's a Kabbalist, and I won't know what they're talking about, but I'll read someone who came a little later, who was based off the Kabbalist, who speaks in a more, an easier idiom. And then I can go back and go, oh, okay. So yes, Sefaria is a great tool for helping to get through some of the more complicated or difficult language commentaries. I'm not sure that the commentator's Bible would help you with that.
So the translation of that commentary is not for everyone. They pick a few ones.
Of course. I mean, every Mikraot Gedolot has a limit to how much space they have on the page.
It's true.
So, it uses, they do Rashi, they do Ramban, they do, who else do they do? They do Rashbam. I know and then they usually will do a selection. So they do like sometimes, Ibn Ezra, sometimes they'll do Or HaChaim, sometimes they'll do Tur HaAroch, right? They'll choose on different pages sort of highlights of other commentators, but they don't always do every commentator for every page.
I found that the easier one to understand the Hebrew are the Spanish and Italian ones. I don't know if it's because a different period of time, like before the Northern European guys, so they spoke much more clean, and the other one they mix more the Hebrew with local languages, so it makes it more difficult. I don't know.
So the explanation that I was given is that they relied very heavily on the language of the primary source that they used, which was Rambam. And Rambam, Maimonides, has excellent, clear, simple Hebrew. And that was sort of like the literary baseline. So everyone had that type of Hebrew before they did the others. So when they made their own commentary. So if you train people to use that type of Hebrew, it's very straightforward. Whereas the Europeans, it's not that their Hebrew wasn't clear. It's usually that their Hebrew was very abridged. They left out lots of words, like the Tosafot, and that was partly also because of editing. That if you read the full version, it's much easier, but they're often condensed. And that makes it much harder because the words are just missing, or they're using shorthand everywhere. And that was more common in the European tradition. It was almost like the Europeans were writing more notes, and the Sephardim were writing full paragraphs. And it's not about clarity or skill, it's just how they approached the job they were doing.
Yeah, I found a big difference between the France and German Jew communities than in Spanish and Italian. A huge difference.
Yes, I absolutely agree.
Okay, so I'm happy. Thank you. That it's not just me. That's okay.
But remember, there are insights in all of them that are amazing. I try to, when I'm doing my own teachings, I try to refer to commentators from all over because they do share an awful lot of insights. They just often will say them in different ways or emphasize different aspects.
But frustrate you because you say that, wow, it's amazing idea. Suddenly there's something that, what is that? And you say, okay, whatever. Go to the other one that is more straightforward. The Hebrew that.
But sometimes it's worth chasing down what they're trying to say, And again, you'd think I don't stop, but I'm gonna advocate for Sefaria again. One of the nice things about Sefaria is that if you are reading a commentary and they have a reference to the Zohar or a reference to some other book, they'll take you on the link there. And that will, give you a little bit more. It takes longer, of course, because now you're chasing 2, 3, 4 levels of text. But at least you can unpack what the first guy was trying to say a little bit more easily than if you had to open up all the books separately and find the right page and find the place on the page. It's more click, click, click. At least I can look at it and see if I can make sense of it.
I think that a great app, if you like technology that maybe someone can create, is like a photo math. You know what is the photo math? The app that is an app that you like. You take a picture and give you all the exercise, the answer, the work. There's something like that with translation. So you see the Tosafot text, you take like a picture and you select in which language and translate automatically in a much clearer way. That will be those guys will be millionaires.
So two examples on exactly that, and then I'll have to go. But when I was in Japan, we had the Google Translate app, and for Japanese, it has an option that if you hover with the camera over something, it will translate it live in your hand. So if you point it at a newspaper or a sign or something, it'll give you the translation. And sometimes it was very useful, and other times it was just like absolute lunacy. Like it's just, there's no way that's what it's actually saying on that sign. If you go online, you can find lots of funny versions of this. And two, sometimes when I'm trying to translate a commentary for my class, so I can put it on my handout in the English, I'll have trouble also trying to figure out, how do I put this in English, right? What word would be the best synonym in English? And sometimes I'll put it into Google Translate just to see what it says. And it never helps. It's just because, like you said, the language is archaic, the language is very technical, the language uses strange idioms. Translation devices are just not there yet. Maybe in another 5 years, the AI will help us, but we're not there yet.
Okay. Thank you, Rabbi Yasher Koach. Thank you for the shiur.
Always. Thank you all for studying. And
you need to start deciding what is our next Masecha, because we are very close.
We're almost done.
Yes, you need to start giving options.
Well, Yibum is one option. It's very technical and a different topic than you were used to, but we keep bumping into the Levirate marriage, and it's something that we get no examples of in the modern world because we go straight to Chalutza in the modern world. We don't do Yibum at all, really. That may be an option, or maybe we'll do something else. But anyway, I think my dinner's waiting for me, so we're going to finish